Today, we're diving into the global Sumud Flotilla. Now, this is a fascinating story because it was so much more than a protest. It was part humanitarian mission and, maybe more importantly, part high-stakes political theater played out on the open ocean.
So let's just start with the big question that hangs over this whole event. I mean, why would you do this? Why would 500 people get on a bunch of boats and sail directly toward a situation they absolutely knew they couldn't win? Well, it's because the victory they were actually aiming for wasn't going to be won on the water at all.
The best way to think about it is as a piece of performance art. The real goal here wasn't just to deliver aid, it was to create a massive global spectacle. It was a carefully choreographed performance, and the entire world was the intended audience.
All right, so if this was a performance, who was on stage? The organizers knew that for this to really work, they needed a very specific cast of characters and a really powerful motivation driving the whole thing.
First off, you've got the sheer scale of this thing. We're not talking about one or two boats. We're talking more than 50 civilian vessels, all setting sail from Barcelona.
And on those boats, a crew of roughly 500 activists, all there for the same reason. And get this, they came from 44 different countries. This wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a carefully constructed global coalition. I mean, that's designed to be a diplomatic headache for anyone who tries to stop them.
And when you look at who was actually on board, you see the strategy really come into focus. You don't invite people like Greta Thunberg and Nelson Mandela's grandson Mandela by accident. Having them there transformed the flotilla from a simple protest into a potential international incident. The point wasn't to sneak by. It was to make sure that when they were inevitably stopped, the whole world would be watching.
The mission's name, Sumud, tells you everything you need to know about the philosophy behind it. It's an Arabic word that means steadfastness. It's not about a big, aggressive fight. It's about endurance. It's about the nonviolent, persistent act of just being there, of refusing to be ignored. This flotilla was basically that idea, just, on the water.
Now, on paper, the official objective was simple: to break the long-standing maritime blockade of Gaza. The organizers, and a lot of human rights groups, see this blockade as a form of collective punishment, something that's not allowed under the Fourth Geneva Convention. And that official goal? Well, it immediately set up the central conflict of this whole drama, a fundamental disagreement over which international laws even apply when you're out on the open sea.
And right here, you can see the legal stalemate in black and white. On one side, you have the activists and the UN, pointing to freedom of navigation on the high seas. It's a basic right. They argue that being stopped in international waters was illegal, period. But on the other side, Israel argues it has the right to maintain a security blockade, and they frame the flotilla as a political provocation. Both sides are quoting international law, they're just reading from completely different playbooks. And it wasn't just the activists making this argument. United Nations experts had already weighed in before anything even happened. Their position was crystal clear. Stopping these boats would be a grave violation. That added a whole lot of international weight to the flotilla side of the argument.
Okay, so the stage is set. The legal lines are drawn in the sand, or I guess in the water. What actually happened when these two positions finally collided in the Mediterranean?
Well, over about 3 days in early October, it all played out pretty much as everyone expected. The interception started about 75 miles off the coast, so clearly in international waters. The vast majority of the activists were detained and taken to port, and by the third day, the whole operation was over and deportations had begun.
The second those boats were boarded, the physical confrontation might have been over, but a whole new battle began. The battle for the story. The organizers were ready. They had videos pre-recorded. Greta Thunberg's message went live, saying, "If you were watching this, I was taken against my will." That immediately frames the whole thing as a kidnapping. At the exact same time, Israeli officials were pushing their narrative of a safe and peaceful transfer. The event was now about one thing: which of these two stories would win in the global media?
And this brings us all the way back to that first question we asked. If the boats were always going to be stopped, if the aid was never going to get through, what was the real point? Well, this is where we find out what the flotilla was really carrying.
Here it is, the central paradox of the whole mission. Logistically, a total failure. The aid never got there, but strategically, it was a massive success. Why? Because it generated huge global headlines and forced everyone to start talking about the blockade again, putting it right back under an international microscope.
So the flotilla's most important cargo was never in the ship's hold. It was the people on deck. The real cargo was the witnesses, The journalists, the doctors, the politicians, all there to document what happened. It was the test of international law being played out for everyone to see. But most of all, the real cargo was the global media narrative they were determined to create.
And this statement from the UN experts really nails why something like this happens in the first place. It suggests that these flotillas are a direct symptom of institutional failure. When the official channels, like the UN Security Council, can't or won't act, you see ordinary citizens stepping in to try and fill that void.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. When the world's highest courts and councils are at a standstill, do the high seas become the new courtroom? The global Sumud Flotilla seems to suggest that for a lot of people, the answer is yes. They're turning the ocean itself into both their stage and their court of law.